Why am I excited about this session? Because we're at the place where you're going to see the #1 destroyer of any relationship. I mean, it weakens it. You know how we've built on each of the sessions? We start off with honor, making a decision that the people we want to love are valuable. Then we went to nurture, giving the relationships the security, the meaningful conversation, the emotional bonding, the touch. I mean, those are all important, but if we're weak on this session you're about to see, it weakens all the other areas in this whole series. So this is extremely important. And we're going to give you a bonus. We're going to have some couples that are going to interact and actually apply this session right in front of you. So you're going to see them do it. Why is that important? Because the researchers in the marriage and family area are telling us that if we can see couples applying it, if we can see it modeled, so to speak, then it helps us apply it, helps us remember it, so that we can actually implement it more easily and remember it and have it in our life, which is exactly what we want. So I'm excited about it. I'd love to get right into it. Let's go. Okay, this third session is an area that, like I've said, is one of the main areas that I work on in my home to stay in harmony with my children and with my wife. Now, it's the same thing they do with me. We really understand it as a family. We still get into some, disharmony from time to time, just like every other couple, but now we know how to recognize the walls starting to be built up. We know how to get those walls down, keep them out, so that we always stay in harmony. And it's a major factor in keeping a family in close-knit. It's also a major factor in causing a woman, if we violate it, to resist us, especially touch, sexual area. It would be a major reason why some children become rebellious and reject the parents' values and become more destructive as a teenager and as an adult and so on. So it's a major problem. Years ago, in fact, a husband called me on the phone and said, my wife is leaving me. We've been married for 25 years. Can you help us? And I knew some people they knew, so they, said, they know us. Can you help us, please? And I said, well, I'll try. I don't get to do this type of thing very often anymore, but I certainly wanted to. So I said, let me call your wife. And he said, no, she won't talk to you because she has a court order against me, and she hates me, and I can't talk to her, I can't see her, I'm not even supposed to go in the area. I'll be arrested. And I said, well, hey, I've never been turned down yet, and this may be the first one. I said, but let me just call her. Give me her name, phone, and I'll call her. So I got her name, and I called her. And she answered the phone. She was very pleasant. I said, hi, I introduced myself, and I said, I've talked to your husband, and he's asked me to help him. And I was wondering if you had just a few moments to share with me some reasons why it was so hard for you to live with your husband. That's a pretty easy question to ask. Most women will tell me right off, yeah, I'll fill your ear. You got 2 hours? If they're leaving their husband, if they had a court order. So usually they don't turn that question down. But she did. She said, no, I do not want to talk about my husband. I don't want to hear his name. In fact, just hearing his name now is going to upset my whole day. And I thought, uh-oh, this is the first one. I said, so I was treading water as fast as I could, and I said, for you to have this kind of response, he must have been a horrible person to live with. She said, you have no idea how horrible he was. And she gave me several examples. I said, oh, that's unreal. How'd you endure that for 25 years? She says, I don't know how I endured it. In fact, he used to do this and he used to do that. And then she said, hey, you're getting me to talk about him. And I told you I didn't want to talk about him. And she says, now I'm all upset. And I said, I am so sorry. I did not realize how serious this situation really is with you. And I said, thank you for your time. And we hung up. And I called him right back. And I said, yeah, you're in big trouble. And he was in big trouble. And I've seen some other situations like that. I remember the time in Florida when a young couple, they'd only been married about 10 years or so, and they were separated and were planning to divorce. And I called him, and he wasn't interested at all in meeting. And yet she wanted to. So we did finally meet at this hotel I was staying in, and we came into a room about this size. And I just got some chairs. There was no one else there. And I put 3 chairs, 2 facing me. And I said, okay, let's just talk about this right now. And I started asking him some questions. And he said, oh, this is a waste of time. He says, I hate this woman so much next to me. I can't even look at her. What am I doing here? And I explained to him in a half hour or so what you're about to hear. And I watched this man and this woman melt. And I watched them walk out holding hands. And I watched them get back together in a hurry. Because he never knew why he was so angry and what that anger was doing in their marriage. She didn't know either. And that's what this session is all about. How to detect the erosion of a relationship, what to do about it, and get that marriage or relationship back together. And this is for singles and couples and parents, whatever. Here's the way I explain it. I say that a person is really sort of made up of 3 ingredients, let's say. It's kind of like our spirit, our mind, and our body, let's just say. I say that the spirit of a person is like our innermost being. It's who we are as a person. Our mind is our mind, will, and emotions. It's where we feel. It's where we talk with someone. It's where we give in or resist in our will. And our body is all of our physical makeup and hormones and skin and everything else. So that we all have a threefold relationship with everyone. We tend to. And this is just a little handle that I use to explain the dynamics of a couple or a family or a friend or whatever. And I'll show you what I mean by this. Let's pretend that, give me your first name again down here in the front rows. Richard, okay. Richard, let me show you how we can have a full relationship where all 3 of these factors can be present. See, your spirit checks my spirit out. There's no words being spoken. Because our facial muscles and our eyes and our body language all sort of communicates into the person's spirit. So we just sort of look at each other and sense whether we appreciate someone, whether we're open to talking to them or whatever. Okay, so we've sensed each other already this evening and so on because you've been right here the whole time. Now, second, our mind can touch. Because I can say to you, Richard, how you doing tonight? Great. And he said, great. See, and he said it with a smile and body language, okay? Now, can I ask you to come over here? I want to shake your hand. Can you come up here just for a second? I want to shake your hand, okay? Thank you. Appreciate it very much. Okay, now, be seated if you want. Now, so I just had a total relationship with Richard. My spirit, my mind, and my body. Because his will gave in and he got up and he came over here and shook my hand, so we touched. So we've had a total relationship. Now, Richard, I think most of us would agree it's kind of a shallow relationship, but it's still, nevertheless, it's still a relationship. Now, from now on, if we got to know each other better, it would only go up. But it would go up in all 3 of those areas. We'd get to know each other, who we really are better. We'd talk more. I'd know about your past. And how many years did you say you've been married? 47 years, you know. I guess, did we already express appreciation for 47 years? You know, we ought to do that. It's great. You must have married when you were 12. Anyway, okay, so we've had a total relationship. As we got to know each other better, we'd become better friends. And we'd probably hug. Okay, we'd be touching. We'd be talking in our mind. We'd be sensing our spirit, being open. That happens in all of our relationships. People you meet in the elevator or whatever. Then from there on up, it gets deeper and deeper and deeper in those 3 areas. Now, this is what I did not understand in my relationship with my wife and kids for the first several years. I did not understand that you can wound someone's spirit and they start closing on you. I remember one time we were coming home in the evening from a meeting as a family, all 3 kids now. And we were driving home in our station wagon and probably Carrie or somebody said, hey, let's stop at a, Quick Mart or whatever and get some donuts and let's have a party. And I said, hey, great idea. So we pull into this place, we get all this stuff, we throw it in the car, we go on our way home. It's night now and I have the lights on, so I'm driving into the driveway and out runs our long-haired Siamese cat. His name was Puff. And I never liked cats at that time. I used to say, get out of the house, kind of thing. And everybody else in the family would go, Dad, or Norma would say, Carrie, I can't believe you did that, kind of thing. I had no idea what she was feeling because that was really part of her life. And I could separate all that as a male, and I just didn't like cats at the time. Now, I like cats a lot now, but I didn't at the time. Okay? Now, so Puff was almost, sometimes you get a cat or a dog, it's almost human, jump in the kids' arms, kind of thing after school, They loved Puff. And Puff's mom, they loved Puff's mom too. But Dad didn't at the time. So Dad's pulling into the driveway. It's at night. Puff comes running at the car to greet everybody. And Norma says, watch out for Puff. And I said, yeah. Thunk. I run over Puff in our driveway. Okay, chaos breaks out in my car. I mean, total chaos. I'm being accused of things that would put me in prison, really. I'm not saying a thing to anybody, because everybody's freaking out. The kids are weeping on the ground, I basically had to herd the family into the house. But what I did is I so deeply offended everyone in my home, but I did not know the depth, even at the time. So I'm trying to get him into the house, we get him into the house, and Carrie's over Mike, patting him, say it was Puff's time, Mike, because he was really crushed. Greg was crying in his bedroom. I went to change my clothes so we could we actually had a little funeral service, actually, but the only one I could get to go with me was Greg, and I had to hold him for a while and everything. I went to the bedroom to change my clothes, and the door was locked. Now, see, that's a nonverbal sign that I have... I'm beginning to close the spirit of my wife, see, or I've massively closed it anyway. So what happens is we have this little service outside where we've buried Peter Rabbit and all of our other animals and everything else. In fact, we've really never had much luck with cats. We have one now. We have for a long time. We have a dog forever, kind of thing. In fact, only 6 months later, the real estate lady ran over Puff's mom, and then, of course, we lost the one just before we moved, and a number of things. In fact, I had a guy one time in my seminar stand up, right up and say, I don't know about, he said, unannounced, he just stood up, he says, I don't know about all you people. I wouldn't mind being this guy's wife, but I'd sure hate being one of his cats. And, so anyway, okay, now, what I really did in essence is I wounded my wife's spirit, which I'm capable of doing. When we were first married, what I did was I used to tell a lot of jokes. I spoke to young people's groups, kind of thing, and I'd take, Norma would go with me, and I'd say, hey, let me introduce my wife, Norma, and we'd all go, kind of thing. And then I'd say, hey, I'm going to tell you, this woman, she's wonderful. She treats me just like a god. I mean, every morning she serves me burnt offerings. Or I'd say, you know what, being married to this woman over here, I mean, she's just like an angel. She's always up in the air harping about something. She never has an earthly thing to wear. Or this one. I could hardly wait to use this one when I got it. Hey, the other day she and I took a trip, the airport, SkyCap comes out and says, can I help you with your bag? And I said, no, thanks, she can walk. Now, see, I thought that was a scream. Now, the problem is, I was not aware of what that was doing to my wife. I was not aware of how a woman is designed differently than we are in general, an average woman. And so my jokes were funny to me, not to her. On the way home, she'd say, I didn't appreciate your funny joke today. And I'd say, would you relax? Hey, loosen up. We're trying to reach these little kids, Hey, we need to do this kind of... Never knew what I was doing. Had no idea that doing that kind of thing can deeply offend and close the spirit of someone. But hey, I had absolutely no idea at all what I was doing. So, basically what happens when this kind of thing happens is that we begin to offend someone. They start developing anger inside them. When they start developing anger, I say, it's just my handle, that they start closing their spirit. When they close their spirit, what happens is that they close their mind and their body at the same time. See, if this was my spirit, let's say the outside tips of my finger, and my mind was right here in the center part of my palm, and my body, let's say, represent my inside of my hand here. If I close my spirit, I tighten up my spirit, I close the person out, spirit, mind, and body. In other words, I don't want to talk to them. My will stiffens, and I don't like them emotionally anymore. It's exactly what happens when you close someone's spirit. Plus, they don't want to touch anymore. No touching me. Have you ever done this? Have you ever offended your wife or your husband? You go to hold their hand, they get clammy. See, that's usually a sign. It's like the time that I was fishing up in the mountains in Colorado with my family, and I told the 3 kids to go fish downstream, and I was going to fish upstream, because I knew they were only going to fish for 5 minutes and they get all tangled up, and the whole story. So I just said, you're on your own. And because I lose consciousness when I'm around a beautiful river. Anyway, conquer the river. And so I'm going up the river. All of a sudden, I'm at this great hole. I'm catching all these fish. Greg comes roaring up the river saying, Dad, he's screaming something. I say, get out of the river. You're going to chase all the fish. And so he gets out of the river and comes around and says, Dad, Carrie broke her leg. See, and I have to admit, right off, I thought, oh, what a place to break your leg, You're going to break your leg, break it in Phoenix, not up in the mountains, kind of thing. So I said, okay. I said, come over and hold this pole, and I'll go up and help her. Hey, we're into conquering the river. Anyway, So I go up and I check her leg. It's not broken. It's just bruised. She jumped in the water after a fish and hurt her leg. And so I said, keep it in the ice water because it's great for a bruise. So I went up and caught another, I'm embarrassed to say this, but I caught another trout. And then I came down and got her. Her leg was blue by the time I got down. Anyway, what I did to her, and it wasn't the fact that I did it, it was how I did it. Because I pulled her out of the water and I said, come on, I'll get you up with Mom. Mom will take care of you. So I'm pulling her up the bank, and I'm jerking her up the bank. And what I'm doing is I'm offending my daughter. The harshness, the roughness, she knew exactly what was taking place. Dad honored fish more than her. And I could see it happening, but I didn't want to make the decision because it was too tempting. So we get halfway up, and she's saying, Dad, my leg, my leg. So I finally stopped. She says, Dad, she says, I can't believe how you're treating me. And I went, you're right. And I literally put my arms around her because I know that's a need, right? I put my arms around her just to hold her and say, you know what, you mean a lot more to me. Because I was offending her. You mean a lot more to me than trout and streams and all the rest of these things. And I'm holding her. And it's in the afternoon, hot day in Colorado. And she breaks out of my arms, and I can't hold her. And she looks up at me and she says, Dad, did you use deodorant today? Now, there's times you can't show the affection to you, but what I didn't want to do, I didn't want to close her spirit. Because when you close the spirit of your children, they close you out. They deny your values. You like God, they don't like God. You like that kind of music, they don't like that music. You like those friends, they don't like those friends. You don't like those friends, they like those friends. Because whatever you like, they don't like, and whatever you don't like, they like. Because anytime you close someone's spirit, they want to put distance between you. Same thing in an office. You close the spirit of an employee and watch the morale go down. Because when they close up on you, they'll disagree with you. There'll be more backbiting in that office than you can imagine. There'll be stiffening of the will. And there'll be people quitting when they're qualified people. They could do well in that business, but they can't stand your presence physically. They don't want you touching them, and they don't want you near them. I work with professional athletes all the time. I know there's one particular team in this country, and now somebody will want to know, I'm sure, but there's one particular team where the coach offends the players all the time, and they're always closing their spirit to that coach, and they've never won the playoff yet. And I can almost guarantee you they never will, because you can't get a motivated group of players when they have their spirit closed. Because closing of a spirit demotivates. It causes limpness, and it causes reaction. It causes disagreement. The same thing is true in a marriage. When a man offends a woman and she begins to close her spirit, she will resist him in every way. She'll disagree with you. You can put your arm around her. She'll be cold. She'll be unresponsive. And her will and her feelings, she'll lose her feelings, and she'll say, I don't even know what I saw in you. I don't even like you anymore. And they'll literally say that right to your face. I don't like you anymore. I don't know if I ever did. And even those words can be spoken to us, and they don't necessarily have to remain that way, because that's all solvable. And all this takes place with, I can do this with my children. I never want this to happen with my children. So there's not a day that I know of in the last 10 years where my children have gone to bed with their spirit closed towards me. Because I now know what it looks like. In fact, what we really do is we notice the nonverbals. And I'd love to have you all become experts in noticing the nonverbals. You can see it every time. They're clammy. They usually turn their back to you. Their facial expression, their body language, all that kind of thing. In fact, what we can say is, this is the kind of thing that happens. Let's say that, Marv, let's say you come home someday from whatever you're doing, and you walk into the house, and you say, hi, hon, I'm home, and she's not speaking. And so you go into the room wherever she is, and say, hi, hon, is everything okay? And she doesn't say anything to you. And so you go over to touch her, and you put your hand on her shoulder, and she goes, just don't touch me. She says, just leave me alone. I don't feel like talking right now. What does all that mean, non-verbally? What it means usually, it doesn't have to be this in every case, because it could be she's angry at some neighbor or somebody else or boss or whoever, who knows, the children or someone. But immediately a person can think to themselves, I wonder if I've been closing her spirit. So we can wonder that. So what we do is we check, we touch, and we say, what's going on here? And she says, just don't touch me right now. I'm angry, and I wish, I don't want to be bothered right now. She may say something like this, which is really important for guys to hear. She may say, oh, you always do this. And as far as I'm concerned, you'll never change. See, that's all nonverbal. You want to hear the nonverbal. You don't want to hear those words. Because the average man hears those words on the left side of his brain, and it's not a good idea. Because if you hear those words on the left side of your brain, then you may say something like this. Oh, I always do that, huh? Did I do it this morning? Did I do it yesterday? You know I don't always do that. See, that's a logical discussion when we're talking about emotion in a person's spirit closed. You can never open a person's spirit usually. I mean, I don't know of a case where you start logically opening a spirit by an argument. Because an argument usually closes it all the more. Because it's usually harsh and dishonoring and so on. And the other thing is when they say you'll never change, you can't say, oh, yes, I can. I remember counseling one time an all-pro defensive player for the Dallas Cowboys. And we were in a restaurant, and they were in a big fight, that morning. And they came to me and said, now what are we going to do? We've been hearing your stuff. Now what do I do? So I started talking to him. I said, okay, let me ask you a question. 0 to 10, how bad is this? He says, it's probably a 6. And she said, a 6? It's a 2. She says, I really am upset by this whole thing, because our relationship has gone down to a 2. So I said, okay, here's what you do. I want you to put your arm around her. And I just want you to be soft with her, and I just want you to say, help me understand what I did today that's really offended you. She looks right at him, she says, he doesn't want to do this. I can tell he doesn't want to do this. You know what he says? I can do this. I know how to do this. He puts his arm around her, and I says, now wait a minute, this is not going to work. I said, let me show you how to do this kind of thing, okay? I said, now watch this. And so he's watching there, and I said, okay, now play like I'm you, I said. I want you to reach across the table, and I want to hold your wife, and I just want to put my hand on top of her hand gently. And I said, you're really hurting, aren't you? And I said, I know what I said a little while ago really offended you. Really closed your spirit, didn't it? You know what that woman did? Her facial muscles started to relax. Her body language just started to give in. Tears welling up in her eyes. And I said, see what's happening here? And she stops. She says, yeah, but he'd never do this. And he says, I could do that. She's not listening to the nonverbals. You don't want to get into a verbal conversation when you're closing someone's spirit to get it open. See, if a person says something like this, ooh, this bugs me. Don't touch me. Ooh, I tell you what, as far as I'm concerned, you will never change, and you always do this. That tells you your spirit's closed about that much. Could be a man, could be your children. If it's just a little bit saying, well, you always do this, and I can't believe you keep doing this, then it's just a little bit. But if they start throwing things at you, if you come home someday and the front door's locked, that could be big problems if it's usually open. Then you go around the back, and you go in, and she throws something at you, and hits the vase, explodes above your head, and she has a piece of paper in her hand, the kids are behind her, and say, this is a court order that says you got to get these bags and get out of here, because we hate you, don't we, kids? We all hate him, yes? And then a man can say something like this, well, can't we talk about this? And a woman is capable of saying, no, we can't talk about this. I don't feel like talking about it. I never want to talk about it again. And even if she said it this way, no, I don't feel like talking about it. I'm done talking about it. I don't want to talk about it. What does the average woman really saying when she says, I don't want to talk about it? Do you think I knew that? She's literally saying, let's talk about it. But the left side of the brain doesn't hear that. So a lot of times we say, okay, if you don't want to talk about it, forget it then. You see, the language she's speaking is, I want to talk about it, but in a certain way. I just don't want to talk about it in any way, harsh or anger or lectures or whatever. I want to talk about it in a certain way. Because, ladies and gentlemen, it is possible to close someone's spirit so tight that they hate you and they want to leave you. And it's possible to open that person's spirit so they don't want to leave you. Where they get their feelings back. Because feelings follow honor. Feelings follow having your spirit open. They come back. And that's what's significant. In fact, let's say you've already closed your mate's spirit a little bit, or your children, or a friend, or an employee, or a boss, because bosses will your history if you close their spirit. But let's say you've closed somebody's spirit. How do you open it? Now, I'm going to go back to the Puff story, and then I want to tell you another one about my son, Greg. Greg, when he was about 6 years old, we had a rule in our home, nobody screams when I'm on the phone. Because I dealt with a lot of people, leaders all over the country, and I didn't want anybody to think my family was out of order. So, just a little rule we had, around the house, okay? Now, I was on the phone one time in the master bedroom. Greg comes into the master bedroom screaming and hollering, jumping up and down, screaming. I couldn't even hear the guy on the phone. I said, shh, I said, I was telling him to get away, get downstairs. I said, okay? And he wasn't moving. He was screaming. So I said to the guy, look, I got to get back to you. Something's come up. I went over and I grabbed him. I said, you were screaming on the phone. You know we're not screaming. I'm on the phone. So I shoved him and he hits the floor, in the hall. I said, get in your bedroom. So he got in his bedroom, and we have a little stick that the kids, I made with the kids, and very seldom got it, but they decorated and everything else, And so I whomped on his little bottom a couple of times. Then I stood up. I had the stick in my hand, and I thought, that's what you get for violating that rule. Now, I know it is possible to literally have an experience like disciplining your children when it doesn't close their spirit. Because I've watched it happen in my home. You don't have to offend someone in discipline. But I offended my son. It wasn't the fact that what I did was offensive. It was how I did it. I was rough with him, bold. I was pushing him. I was very dishonoring. And I was very offensive. So I closed his little spirit. How did I know? I looked at the nonverbal. My little boy was crying. He was looking at me. He was backing up. Anytime people back up, that usually means I don't want to be near you physically. In his eyes was, I hate you. And my will is stiff to you. Ask me to take the trash out, kind of thing. They don't move when their spirit is closed. In fact, they're very, very dishonoring with their mouth when their spirit is closing. I knew that I had closed my son's spirit. I also know that rebellion can follow that if it's on a regular basis. And I don't want that in my home. I want harmony. So watch what I did to open up my son's spirit. There's a number of things we can actually do to have that experience. First thing I did is that I got real soft in my own mind and spirit. I actually got down on my knees so I could be eye to eye with him, because that's honoring. In fact, the word honor, part of the Hebrew definition of honor is bending the knee in the presence of somebody valuable. That's all over the world. People who are religious, what do? They bend their knee. And I didn't even know at the time how significant that is, but I got real soft. And I didn't know how much that's honoring. Real gentle, tender. Second thing I did is I said, Greg, why were you crying? And why didn't I ask that question before I did all this? It never occurred to me. And all of us make these kinds of mistakes, and they don't occur to us, but we can rectify these things if we know how to spot a closed spirit. So I said, Greg, why were you crying? So here's what he says to me. He's still crying. He's backing up. He says, Daddy, I fell in the bed, though, with my ear. So I look at his ear for the first time, and it's swollen and bleeding, and I went, oh, hey. I said, you know what, Greg, Dad was so wrong to have spanked you. I would have been screaming, Greg, if I'd have hit the... And then he said, and then, of course, he nailed me good. He said, and Daddy, he says, when you push me in the hallways, I hit the same ear on the toy box. So now I'm feeling like a child abuser, and I'm saying, oh, brother. But see, all of this is part of opening a person's spirit, because they see they're too valuable to be treated like this. I said, Greg, you're way too valuable to be treated like this. What I did was wrong. You know that one of the number one complaints of children with their parents is they won't admit they're wrong? Hey, when you see your child's spirit's closing, maybe what you did was okay, but maybe the timing or maybe how you did it was wrong. Look for what offended them and admit that. And then I know they want us to touch them. So I tried to touch him, and I knew he wouldn't. But then I know that opening a person's spirit, you want some kind of response from them. So I said, Greg, I don't deserve this, and you may not be able to do this. In fact, I actually handed him the stick and said, I'm the one that deserves the spank. He dropped it, and he said, I don't want any part of you. That was his whole body language. And I said, Greg, you may not be able to do this, but do you think you could forgive Daddy for what he did? And Greg rushes to my arms, throws these arms around me. We fall back on the bed, and how they are, when they've been crying, he's on my chest, and I'm holding him, and I'm just touching him, and I'm looking at his ear, and I went, oh, Greg, are you sure you've forgiven me? Now, here's what he does. He pats me. He says, oh, Daddy, we all make mistakes. Now, how do I know my son's spirit is opening? Because he's touching me. Because he's talking to me. He's open to me. He's not closed. And that same dynamic takes place in our home. I mean, what did I do with my wife? I mean, the bedroom door was closed after I had run over Puff. I mean, Puff was really special to Norma. And see, I didn't even at the time understand the full impact of what something like that could do to a woman. And so, when I finally was finished with everything and had the kids in bed and so on, I went to open the bedroom door and it was unlocked. And so I walked inside and I decided to do the same things. I said, Smalley, you've been learning that softness and gentleness and understanding opens a person's spirit. Where your wife is lying in bed with a mega closed spirit. What are you going to do? Do what you know is right. So I walked over next to her. I never said a word to her. And I knelt down next to the bed. I just took her hand and held it with both hands. It was real warm and responsive. I thought, ha-ha, it's opening up. See, because anytime they're responsive, you know it's opening. It's not that bad. So I said, you're really hurting, aren't you? I just wanted understanding. That's the second thing we do, understanding. Here's what she says to me. And I said, I know you know that I really feel bad about this. And she says, oh, I know you feel bad about this. She says, I know you didn't mean to murder Puff. That's what she said to me. You know, and I thought, now I could have reacted. I could have said, wait a minute, that reminds me of, next time in front of the kids, don't you ever accuse me of those kinds of things. I could have nailed her with a lecture, left brain lecture, right? Hey, what does that do? Closes the spirit. I want the spirit open. Same thing is true with me. I mean, the exact same thing is what we do as a family with each other. If she offends me, I mean, she's offended me a lot of times. I've offended her. And we have made a pact in our home that we don't let a day go by that somebody's spirit is closed. Because the relationship is weakened every day that you allow that to happen. You know the worst things you can leave a person with? Anger. Because anger does a lot of damage inside a person and between two people. You got to get the anger out. And this is just a little handle for me to use. And I'm persistent when I do this. They may say, don't, leave me alone. I don't want to talk about it right now. I still persist as much as I can to get there, to get that understanding, to get that softness, to get that person's spirit open. One of the things I've really learned that's very important that I have to continue to learn because my left brain, kind of thing wants to give the lecture or, why do you do this? And so when I did go over and kneel down next to Norma and took her hand, when I took her hand in a gentle, sensitive way, in just a careful way, it's almost like what I saw many of you doing when you picked this Stradivarius up. I saw you being careful with it. Some people will come up here and pick this up and look at it during breaks, and they'll check it over, but you're really, really careful with it, just like I am with it. And because we don't want to hurt it. It's too valuable to wound or to mar or whatever. Well, that same thing is true with a person. People are far more valuable than a piece of wood. And so, but oftentimes we actually treat things around us with more greater value and more honor than we do the people we really love. So that what a woman really needs, and a man needs this too, and children need it, so we all need it from one another, friends need it. But when we have wounded them, when I held her hand and did it gently, what I was really doing was the touch. And the reason I brought the pillow up, because I want you to remember that what we need when we're hurting is softness, is tenderness, gentleness. Now, it is not our nature. The majority of men, we would rather just either avoid it, or I'm sorry I was caught, or whatever. What we really need to do is make a decision on the left side of our brain and say, okay, now this person is valuable. What do I need to do? Your children come home from school and they've done poorly in a test. They don't need our lectures. Anytime we lecture somebody who is hurting, it's like taking a 1-inch drill bit and putting it in your drill and go, and just drains what little energy they have left. What strengthens people and what energizes them is when we touch them. It's when we're tender with them. In fact, just let me see a show of hands here, just out of curiosity. And I ask this question all over the nation. How many of you women specifically would really love it the next time your husband does something that closes your spirit, causes anger to start growing inside, and you really feel offended and your spirit has been wounded? How many of you would love to have him just come over, not say anything, not a left brain, any kind of discussion about lecturing and kinds of things, just put his arms around you and hold you and ask the question, either how are you doing, or I know this, I can tell, I really hurt you, but mainly he just puts his arms around you and holds you tenderly. How many of you would love that? Let's see your hand. See that? 100% almost. Well, we all need that. I need that. The time that I got a phone call from my brother that my mother had passed away, and it was we were real close, and boom, it hit me and all that kind of thing. And so I hung up the phone and told Norma, said, well, Mom's passed away. Guess what? One of the first things she did, she starts lecturing me because I hadn't called her lately. And I hadn't written her. And she said, I've told you something like this was going to happen. She said, I can't believe you haven't called her. I told you last week you need to call her. She was all over my case. Now, in her mind, she was thinking relationship, and, and she feels bad about it. I'm not the one that feels, I feel bad that she's gone, not that I didn't call her. So I just say, hey, I don't need this right now. I don't need a lecture. So she actually said, okay, and then she went in and called her dad, because she hadn't called him lately. And anyway, she came back in the living room where I was just sort of sitting in the chair, and she knelt down next to the chair, and she could have sat across the room or whatever. But she didn't. She knelt kind of next to the chair, and she put her arm on my shoulder and my arm, and she just said, you know what? I know you didn't need that. I know what you needed was for me to just understand and just be with you. You didn't need me to start saying those things, and that's true. And I loved it. It melted me, relaxed me. That's the value of being tender. It's one of the keys to staying in harmony. Let's review. What does this stand for now? Honor. Stamp Stradivarius on everybody's head. All right? Now, second, what does this stand for? Right. We have genuine love, and genuine love is 4 things. It's security, it's conversation, it's romance, and it's touch. So those are the things that we do that build a marriage and a relationship. Now, I want to conclude with a visual object that helps us all understand a major difference between men and women. It's not in every case. I want to say that again because there's a lot of sensitive men, which is wonderful when we're sensitive. But the average home that I'm in, I'm just telling you what I see all over the world. This is true. But what I need is a man to come up here and volunteer. Just stand up here, close your eyes, hold your hand out. I'm going to put 2 objects in your hand, one at a time. You just tell me what they are, and this will illustrate a major difference between men and women. Any man, doesn't matter who it is. It could be this man down here, or it could be this man over here. It could be any man. This man right here. Very good. Okay, your name is?
Robin Wood.
Robin. Robin Wood?
Yes.
Very good, Robin Wood. Okay, just turn around right here. All right, daring man. Right over here like this. Just hold out your hand. Okay, like that. Close your eyes. Don't open them again. I'm going to put 2 objects in your hand, one at a time. And you just tell me what they are. But you're not peeking. Everybody else can see it, knows what it is, but you don't. Okay? So, here we go. Here's the first object. Everybody else can see it, but Robin Wood cannot see that. Okay, there it is. What do you think that is? A rock. Very good. Keep your eyes closed. Most guys can pick that right up. Okay, now, I'll put the second object in your hand. Keep your eyes closed. Everybody else can see it. You can't see it. Okay, I want you to, now, don't feel it initially. Tell me if you can tell me what you think that is. Go ahead and feel it if you can't tell. A little rock. Very good. Let's give him a hand. You got 100. Okay? Robin? Okay, good. All right. Thank you. Now, this could be a major difference in the typical home. A lot of times a guy will say something to his wife or his girlfriend or his mom or whatever. Testosterone-loaded, left brain dominant male. This is true most of that. If you're right brain, it may be totally different, dominant. But this is a typical thing. You'll say something to her and think it's no big deal. Just a little tiny pebble, never hurt any, wouldn't hurt a flea. No big deal. All of a sudden you hear her wince. You see her facial expression. You see tears come to her eyes. You might say something like this. Pinch her on the side and say, are we going to eat desserts on our vacation? Now, it's no big deal. It's just a pebble to a man. But how would a woman feel that? And how would a woman feel a joke? How would a woman feel a lot of things that we do and say? This is how they feel it. Right here. Listen to this one. And we wonder why they're lying on the ground bleeding. And all we really dropped on them was this little thing. Why are you so upset? It's such a dinky thing. It's no big deal. I can't believe you're crying about this. Why is that? Because women tend to feel things several times deeper than we do. And if we have the understanding, in fact, this is a tremendous reminder. In the future, you can say, if you see your wife wincing and start to cry and you see her spirit closing, just say to her, how big of a rock was that I just dropped on you? And if she says a humongous boulder, a landslide, then you know you're in big trouble. But you can always open the spirit of a person through persistent, because I value you. See, because my wife is so important to me, and you could say your husband is so important to you and your children, it's worth opening their spirit. If I've dropped this rock, I didn't mean to drop the rock. I didn't know it was going to be a boulder. I thought it was a little dinky thing, no big deal. What you can't do as a woman is say, you know exactly what side that boulder was. You always drop those boulders on me. See, if you tell us that, we're saying, we didn't know. Help us understand. And I can say that our next session is the communication language that helps you say exactly what you want to say to your husband or your wife or your kids or your friend or whoever. So they will know exactly the size rock. They will know exactly how you're feeling. So there's no confusion in the communication. Here's what you can get with the next area we're going to talk about. You can get instant intimacy, deeper than you ever dreamed possible. More intimacy in one day than some couples have in 10 years. You can literally correct one another because this language method is the best method to get the least amount of negative reaction. You can praise a person so they'll never forget it. And you can just clarify your thoughts anytime you want. I mean, you can stop your children dead in their tracks and get them to see where they're doing some things they shouldn't be doing in a way that all the methods I tried up to that point were not as effective in. So that's our fourth area. It's a language system called emotional word pictures. Thanks for being with me, doing the first three. I think we can all realize, we don't have to be missile scientists to see that we can't keep anger inside of us. I mean, we're all going to be angry from time to time in our relationships. We're all going to provoke one another, be struggling together. I mean, everybody does that. I did this last week with my wife, but I know what it takes to get back into harmony with her. And so that's the key to this entire thing. It's not that we're not going to get angry. That needs to be emphasized over and over again. It's that when we do, there's a way to get back into harmony. You know, I'm very excited before we actually do get involved in discussing with a group that we mention again that your next video session is about this communication method that you can say whatever you want and another person will not only understand you instantly, but they will feel your feelings. See, why this is so important, and I'm so excited about you getting it, is because a lot of times we men have a harder time expressing our feelings. And our wife will even ask us, you know, how do you feel about this, hon? And we don't know. We feel fine, but we really don't know how we feel. Well, this is a method that you can use where you can get right into your own heart and connect in an emotional way with your mate or your friend. And it's so key. So that's coming. That's the next one. Now I'm just excited that we have a group of couples here that have joined me. They're friends, been through the seminar before. They've gone through similar things that you've gone through. They want a great relationship just like you have, but they too have struggled from time to time and in conflict. Is that not true from time to time? I mean, is anybody here who hasn't offended your mate at least once in the last month? No, all of us do, for sure. So what we're going to do, as we mentioned, is we're going to give you a chance to see how a couple gets into a struggling situation and then how they resolve it. Because we want you to see it. Because, as we said, we learn better that way, especially in the areas of relationships. So we're just going to start with one of the couples and ask, give us a recent situation where you were, struggling out, and what did you do to solve it? And I'll interact with them, and the other couples can for sure, and we'll just have you see their vulnerability. They'll actually open up and say, here's what's happened to us.
I've got something from this morning.
Just this morning.
Yeah.
So it can be any time. I mean, I was thinking the last month or so, but this is this morning. So let's hear it.
We decided we were going to call home to the boys and let them know the hotel we were at and the number. So Rich is calling, and the answering machine answers, and he's saying, "Well, we're at this phone number," and I'm saying, "Rich, no, tell them the hotel." And he went, "Just be quiet, just be quiet." So
not you.
Yeah.
Not me.
So he hung up, and I was just so offended that he did that. And he's walking down the hallway, and I thought, "Ooh, I'd like to take this brush and throw it at him." So he turns around, and I said that to him. I said, "I'd really like to throw this brush at you." And he came right up to me and said, "I'm really sorry. This is our family."
Okay, what I want to
hugged
actually
me.
do here is I want to have you actually pretend like it's just after this happened. Okay, so show us. What did you do?
What I did was what I've learned from your seminar tapes is that resolve it. Let's do it right now. And so I went into the bathroom and I thought, wow, you know, I really realized what I just did. So I thought, my biggest thing is to go out and talk a lot. But what I did is I just went out and I said I was sorry.
What do you mean you
her.
talk a lot? You mean like...
Well, I try to tell her why I did this and, you know,
Why
really
did
start a
you
fight.
manage?
Justify it.
Really start a fight, yeah.
Exactly, right.
And what it would do, it would turn into a full-blown fight and it lasts for about a week. Just from a little thing like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But I just went out and I just thought, well, okay, I'm just going to give her a hug and tell her I was sorry and that's it. And stop it right then.
Instantaneously, I just melted.
So he put like both arms around you and just gave her a hug and said, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Now, did you need to hear him say, you know, would you forgive me, or was that enough for you?
No, that was enough.
That
He
was
said,
enough.
well, you know, 3 years ago, we would have been mad for months.
We
over
said
this.
that. We talked about
know?
that right over. I says, isn't this something? 3 years ago, this would have been a full-blown fight. I would have got mad, defensive,
Right.
and came back at her.
The nerve
You know,
of her
where
to
it
just point that out. I mean, what a picky thing, right? But now you're aware that this type of thing offends her,
Right.
and you do something about it instantly, which is great.
This is coming from a guy that when I was 9 months pregnant, I was sitting in the bathtub and trying to get it out of the tub, and I pulled the soap rack right out of the wall, and I fell down on my butt, and then
And
got
you're
out.
9 months pregnant.
9 months
Okay,
pregnant.
yeah.
Got out, and I told him, oh my gosh, I fell in the bathtub, and he went into, oh my gosh, you broke the soap thing. Look at what I'm going to have to do. And I thought, you know, who's important here? You know.
I didn't know who was important here.
Yeah. And what'd you do?
Didn't care. I just yelled at her a little bit.
Yeah, yeah,
But now I know.
yeah. And see, and I've known you for a couple years, and I've watched you see the importance of taking control. You know what's really interesting too about what you said, and I think this is a real important point. We said during this session that it's very important, like we said, the fifth point is seek forgiveness. Well, it's not a step, it's not a point. It's what works, it's what restores the connection, and what brings back the harmony. And so it was sufficient for him to get soft and say, you know what,
I blew it.
yeah, I blew it. Again, and don't you feel sometimes like,
Yeah, I know.
will I
Yeah.
ever get to the place where I won't keep blowing it? And what he said was, I was sorry, and he held her. That was sufficient for her. But what if it wasn't? Then you may need to say, well, could you forgive me, or whatever it takes. But see, it's not like steps, boop, 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 you know, and that's going to work every time. You have to feel your way through the situation and say, whatever it takes, this woman is valuable enough. I love her. I want us to be in harmony. Plus, I don't want you with anger, having all the things, immune system weakened, the gulf between us. Biggest problem, and if this is your situation, with kids who come from a divorced home, Dr. Howard Markman told me, who's one of the experts in the world on this, they have never been able to access their anger about what mom and dad did to me, and they don't bring it to the surface and solve it. That's what they take into their future relationships that causes so much havoc, because it's hard for a person to bond emotionally when there's too much anger. So we need to get it out of us, and so that's an example right there of how you do it. But the main thing is that oftentimes men, we are not aware when we do these things. And so that's a key point here. And then when we're nailed, right, then we bristle because we don't want to respond because we didn't even intend for this to happen. You know, even with a newlywed couple, a month, act this out. Show us what happened.
Well, we were in we were in the kitchen, and she had just come home from grocery shopping, you know, and which is normal. We each do it every so often. But she had just come in, unloaded the groceries. My brother had helped her, and I was just curious as to know, I mean, how much was spent. I guess that's. I don't know
How do you ask that?
I don't know if it is or not. I mean, I'm learning here.
Normal. Yeah.
And I said, I made a comment like, I guess I'll find out how much you spent when you ask me for more money. Or I mean, you know, whenever she needs it.
That's good.
But I don't remember meaning it in a cutting or belittling or demeaning way.
In fact, for a male, oftentimes it can be just inquisitive, just facts, filling the air with some information like, I wonder how much this is. You just thought that was logical, makes sense. If you'd
I
had a
think
buddy
so. I
there,
think so.
high five, hey, let's be careful. But when we get married, it changes. And when we say things like that, how did you read it?
I thought he was drilling me about how much money I spent, and then the part about asking him later for money to pay for the groceries, like, bothered me, especially in front of his brother.
Right.
You know, like,
yeah, belittling,
yes,
dishonoring,
yes,
offensive.
yes.
Yeah, but you didn't say anything about it immediately.
Well, actually, it wasn't 2 or 3 weeks ago. It was just like a week ago. 'Cause his brother hasn't been with us that long. So it was only like a week ago. But then this morning he started to drill me again about
Yes.
different, you know, how much do we owe here or there or whatever.
Now, real important thing, even before we get into what you guys actually did, she's using the word drill me again about, now that word means you were on her case. Is that what you're reading?
Yeah.
Now, right, okay, now, isn't it interesting how she feels that you're drilling her? What are you doing? You're just inquisitively making sure that we're doing okay financially. I mean, you're not intending to, right?
I don't think so. I'm concerned about it, but and maybe from that concern comes questions that I don't really mean to ask.
And so what they do many times is read our facial expressions and our tone of voice and read what's really there. And we're just saying, I guess I can get away with saying this because it sounds logical to me to check up on the finances. But you're feeling like what, little kid or?
Well, yeah, but the only reason I feel like he's drilling me is his birthday's coming up in June, and I've been trying to stack away money for his birthday without him knowing it, and he asked me, how much was your last paycheck? How much did you spend on groceries? How much do we owe? And I'm thinking, just don't say
Relax.
anything so I can do something for your birthday.
Right.
And I told him that this morning.
Right. But still it's offensive to you.
Yes.
So now, can you act out what you actually did when you found out that it was offending her?
I didn't know I didn't know I hurt you, and that's basically what I said. And I asked for her forgiveness, and I was sorry.
Did you hug her at all, or?
Well, we were driving.
Oh, you were
But I
driving.
think
Okay.
we were holding hands.
Okay, you were holding hands.
Yeah.
Okay, so she would hold your hand. Now, how did that make you feel? Did you want more? Did you need more from him to really connect more, or?
No, because you'd probably get in an accident. We did, but-
Then you'd really get in trouble for
But when it happens again in your home, let's say, as a woman, just as a unique individual now, what do you need when he offends you next time like that? What would you appreciate him doing?
I like hugs.
Okay.
I like hugs. And he kisses me on the cheek a lot, and I like that.
Okay. All right. Now, when you say hugs, now this is really interesting, because see, there's a lot of women who are saying, well, I can just tell him, how about a hug, okay? But do you know there are a lot of us who don't know what that means? Yeah. I don't know if she wants me to just put one arm there. I mean, this sounds silly, but even in working with pro athletes, a lot of times their wives will say, well, just give me a hug. They don't know whether it's just a, hey, you know. We don't know. So tell us, what do you need specifically, most of the time, let's say, as a woman in the area of being restored? What kind of hug? Just kind of describe it.
We always hug the same way. I'll put my arms around his waist because I'm short and he's taller.
All right.
And he'll put his arms, I don't know, I guess
Kind of
around
the
my shoulder. It's
shoulder.
like a bear hug.
So it's a bear hug, so
It's
it's
a huge
both
hug.
arms.
Yes,
So
both
that's what you
arms.
appreciate.
Huge hug.
Yes.
Would you, and so just a one-arm thing?
No, I
No.
don't like
Yeah,
that.
See?
that wouldn't work with
Yeah.
that.
See, so see, there are a lot of couples that don't realize we have to talk about
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
What we need.
Yeah, exactly what we
That
need.
seems to
So,
come pretty natural.
well, I think you can
He's
see
lucky.
exactly.
He's lucky. It comes natural.
Well, natural to him, it didn't come natural to me because I
No,
didn't
not
come
to
from a
me
touching
either.
home.
No.
Do your parents touch you and hug you?
Oh,
See,
yeah,
I didn't have
that's
that.
great.
I didn't have it at all. Well, I think you can see that it's important that we don't allow the anger to stay. It's normal for you to feel anger. Just get it out as soon as you can. If you just can't do it for a day or two, I mean, what can I say? But the sooner the better. And so just keep working on it sooner. If you need to be hugged during the process, what do you say to one another? Play like you've just offended each other right now and say, okay, now what could I do for you? And what could you do for me? And what would make it better in the future? Because it's going to come. And it's better to practice it ahead of time so you know what to do. So you want to be fumbling around in the dark and making the situation worse. Well, it's been great to be with you, and I can hardly wait to be back with that method of how you can say whatever you want so that your mate can instantly understand you and feel your feelings. We're going to get into one of the most exciting areas that I know of today, and that's a communication method that really does allow us to say whatever we want to someone, and they instantly understand. And I can almost guarantee you that you'll go deeper in intimacy with a person that you really love and want to go intimate with this method than almost any other method I know of. And also, it's a great way to share things with your children. It's just a super communication. In fact, if you're in any area of life that requires you communicate, which is basically anything, salesperson, manager of people, a speaker, a politician, a physician. My physician, a specialist 6 months ago, gave me what we're going to share. I mean, he gave me using this method. Didn't even know what he was doing. We all use it all the time and don't even realize it. But he gave this method, and instantly when he gave it, I understood exactly what he was saying, and I knew I was going to remember it. Because this method activates both the left and the right side of the brain at the same time. I'll give you an example of it, then we'll define it, and then I'll show you how powerful it is, and I'll show you how to create them. And then we'll let you practice. Right in your supplement is a whole number of illustrations and ways to create them, and then lines for you to put your own examples and then to practice with one another. It only takes a short time. You're already using them. And I'll show you how you're already using them all the time anyway. How many times have you said things like this? Boy, this blows my mind, or that person doesn't have all of these oars in the water, or their lights are on, but you can tell they're not home. You know, those kinds of things. I mean, there's hundreds of those types of statements that we could go around and pick up 100 of them right here. That's an emotional word picture. And the moment you use it, the reason it's so effective is because it activates both sides of our brain. And let me show you how this works right in my home. Now, it works with children 3 years of age and on up. I mean, it probably works with younger ones and figure it out, but I know it works with at least 3 years old. But here's my own son, Greg, now. He was 12 years old. And because I travel a great deal and speak around the country, what happens is that when he got to that age, and he wanted me home more, and he couldn't verbalize it, and so what would happen is when I got home from a trip, everybody would hug me, welcome home, Dad, kind of thing, but then he would always reject me instantly and wouldn't let me touch him or talk to him, and he'd say, I'm busy, Dad, I'm going out with my friends or whatever, for at least a couple hours. He'd go in his room and ignore me. I'd go and say, hey, Greg, how you doing? You know, it's been great. You know, I've only been gone a couple of days or 3 days or this kind of thing. And he'd say, Dad, I'm fine. I've had a good time since you've been gone. Now, everybody else was warm to me, but not Greg. And I was talking it over with Norma, and I said, you know, that's really, what's the deal? She says, you know, it's just okay. It's just this age, and he's probably upset with you that you're gone, but it'll be okay. It's no problem. So, and I rely a lot on the relationships in our home with my wife. So anyway, I said, okay. And I said, you know what, though, it's really not good for Greg to learn this kind of a habit. Because let's say after marriage, you know, and things don't go well with his wife or whatever, then he'll just close her out, won't talk to her, won't touch her. That's not good. So I thought, you know, I had to talk to him about it. But then I realized that if you come straight on to a child, especially, and just share things with them, a lot of times they'll react or they resist or argue. And then when you get in an argument, then the whole thing is off. So I had used emotional word pictures, which is this communication method, with adults. I hadn't used them with children yet. So I thought, I'm going to try it on a child and see if it works. And was I amazed. Here's what happened. I take him out to breakfast. And we're at some fast food place, you know, and he's chomping away at the food. And I said, Greg, let me tell you a story. And he says, yeah, Dad, you know, whatever. You know. And so I said, I want you to pretend that you're a star basketball player on a winning team, a winning season, and you're the high point man. And they really need you. And you're on a junior high team. You know, you're a really exciting player. And all of a sudden you get this problem with your neck. I take you to the doctor and you have to have it fixed, you know, but it's a minor thing. But you can't play for 3 weeks. So you're off the team and you know, you go once in a while to watch, but it's really hard on you because somebody's taking your place, you know. You can hardly get back on the team. So 3 weeks go by, you pass your physical, you're back on the team, you show up, you're suited up, you're on the, you know, the bench and saying, hey, Coach, it's great to be back. And everybody says, hey, Greg, it's great to have you back. But they don't play you right away. This guy that's taking your place is pretty good. And so they're all practicing, and you say, hey, Coach, you know, hey. And he says, hey, Greg, we'll get to you in a little while. And I said, Greg, now here's part of the key to tell whether this is working. You got to sense from their nonverbals and look to see if they're really involved in this. They have to feel this story, or we'll explain later on, they have to feel what you use emotionally. So I said, Greg, how does it make you feel? How would you think it would make you feel if your coach rejected you for several hours or even several days? He's chomping away, and he says, oh, Dad, I'd hate that. I wouldn't like that at all. I could see there was some feelings flowing, so I said, Greg, I know you don't realize this, but do you know that you do this to me every month at least once or twice? You treat me just like that coach and your teammates. Now, he's 12 years old, and he says, Dad, I don't treat you like that, coach. What are you talking about? I said, yes, you do. You may not realize it, but you do. At least twice a month, you don't let me back on the team. I've been so excited to get back home, and you reject me every time. You know, and then I explained it to him. I said, you know, when I come home and everybody else hugs me and talks to me, but you always ignore me and go outside or say, don't touch me, you know, and just totally act as if I don't exist. He said, yeah. I said, Greg, that's the way you make me feel. And he said, oh, Dad, I didn't know it made you feel like that. He says, well, I won't do that anymore. And I thought, hey. But then I thought, you know, he's 12 years old. He's not going to remember this. Okay, here's what happens. There is something phenomenal about this method. Because it activates both sides of the brain, it tends to lock it into our memory. 2 weeks later, I'm getting ready. I'm putting my bags in the car, you know, and everybody says, hey, Dad, have a great trip, you know. We've been thinking about you, Dad, you know. And Greg says, oh, yeah, Dad, have a great trip and get ready to be rejected when you get home. Now here's the significance of this, okay? He never rejected me again. That was it.